Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to this Cambridge Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring webinar, featuring 5 quick tips for improving primary student outcomes. I've got just a few pieces of housekeeping before we get started. So we'd love to hear where you're joining us from today, and please feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself. And we'd love to know whether you're using an assessment currently, or what kind of primary student improvements you're doing at your school. Please feel free to put that in the chat as well. Lucy, could you pop to the next slide, please? Thank you. Just please note that your microphones are muted, so we can't hear any members of the audience, and this is to ensure good sound quality throughout the webinar. If you'd like to ask questions, and please do, please post them in the questions section, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. Or you can use the chat functionality. We'll look in both places for questions at the end, which is when, we'll answer questions. You'll receive a certificate of attendance, which will be sent to your email inbox 1 hour after the webinar finishes, and you'll receive a copy of this webinar recording and the slides sent to you via email next week. Next slide, please, Lucy. It's just a little bit about CEM, which is the Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring. We've been working with schools for over 40 years in over 100 countries, and we're known for our evidence-based research approach to baseline and formative assessments, using extensive data sets to support future outcomes and development. We work with schools, ministries, and associations to transform the outcomes of the students they teach. And in 2019, we became part of the University of Cambridge, which has supported our reach and abilities to support young people across the world. We help teachers turn data into knowledge, we bridge the gap between research and practice, and we provide evidence to support good decision-making. So with my introduction out of the way, I'll now hand over to Lucy Baker, who's one of our assessment advisors at CEM, to talk through 5 quick tips for improving primary student outcomes. Over to you, Lucy.
Thank you for that, Megan, and it's lovely to meet you all, and thank you for joining us today. So as Megan said, my name's Lucy Baker, and we're going to be looking today at 5 quick tips for improving primary student outcomes today. So a little bit about me. So I joined CEM in September, and I've become one of the assessment advisors, but I previously was a primary school teacher in Cambridgeshire. I really loved it, and it was great, and the kids are fabulous. So this is why today I've got 5 tips that I think will really help you in the classroom to use our assessments and make your jobs a little bit easier, hopefully. Yeah, it's about do. Let's get on to my first tip for you today. So my first tip is creating a positive and calm classroom environment. As you know, as teachers, this is really important, and I'm sure you do it all already. But when you have assessments, sometimes children can get very anxious and stressed, and I really found that in my teaching practice, that children came very stressed when it came to end of term assessments or with year 2 SATs or year 6 SATs. So what I would really recommend with this is making sure that you use positive language when you do the assessment, and you discuss and you explain why you're doing the assessment to make them feel calmer, and explain that it's a low stakes test, so you don't have to worry. You can do it in a calm way and explain that if it finishes early or it takes too long, depending on how it adapts, it's okay. It's okay, and it's a good thing. So I really, really recommend you praise the pupils after the assessments, because it can be daunting sometimes, especially doing a test online, and there's lots of different sections and everyone's got different questions due to its adaptive nature. It can be a bit different, but remembering to remind the kids how they've done a really great job and that they've done the fabulous work, and that's a really good way to do it for them. I think it's really nice when you have the results to also talk to them about it and explain who's going to have the results and what it means, because sometimes with children they'll be like, oh, I'm going to get bad results, Miss won't think I can't do this, and you go, no, it's okay. And it's a really nice way, I think you can say, these results just help me to teach lessons and support you better and be a better teacher and make your learning more fun. And I think that's a really nice way to do it and builds that positivity in the classroom. But my top tip today, I will say, is if you within CAS as well, but if you're doing aspects or base, I would really recommend having continual provisions set up, ones that are really interactive, or if you have a TA, you can do an activity outside. So you have so when you're doing it one-to-one with the pupils, you have a nice calm environment for them to do it, and it can be nice and relaxing, so you can have that time with the pupil to get to know them better and do the assessment. Yeah, so that is my first tip. My second tip today is collaborating with colleagues. As we know, collaboration is really key in primary schools, and you've always got a fabulous team behind you and you all work together. And as I've found, the best ideas come from when we have those team meetings and we work together and we discuss it. So my big recommendation would be to have those discussions. So when you've done the assessments, when you've got the reports, when you've got all the information you need to move forward, this is the time I think it's great to have those conversations with colleagues. So I would really recommend you look at the reports together and you can plan interventions and learning objectives ready for the future, but also work together to go, okay, so your class is maybe struggling with shape, but then my class is struggling with this. Okay, what would you do? And you can have those nice discussions and see what they would do, because sometimes you have more experienced teachers, sometimes people have taught in different areas and different ways to do it. So it's a really good way to do it. And it looks to sharing ideas, especially if you're not sure how maybe to support a child, or maybe one way isn't working, you can actually discuss what you would do instead and say, why don't you try this and see how it goes in a few weeks? And it's that really nice way to have that discussion. So another thing is, I think it's really good to share successful interventions and lesson plans that you've already made. As we know, you have a lot of work on as teachers, and there's no point making new intervention plans every single year. What you can do is, if you have a teacher who's been doing our chem assessments for a while or has an intervention they've used previously around that area, use it again. If it works in one class, it will likely work in your class, or adapt it to fit in your class. And it saves you time, and it also helps support you and the pupils. I think it's a really good way to do this, and you can create a hub of ideas all together and interventions. Then in the year ahead, you've got them for the next year, and it just help you with time and just collaboration. And one key thing that I think will be really helpful with this is identifying children with the same areas of development from different classes. So by this, I mean that if you have one pupil, let's say from year 3, 2 from year 4, and maybe there's 1 from year 5, if they all have the same area they need to develop that's been highlighted by the reports, I would really recommend that you then maybe have a TA or an extra adult support take those children out of class and do that intervention all in a time that's good, and then work together to do that. So then you've actually targeted 3 different classes, but those pupils have got the really important learning. And I think that's a really good way to do it, so you can see the gaps. And if there's consistent gaps instead of certain children in different year groups or different classes, you can just work together, and it saves you time and helps you with staffing as well to do these interventions. And my last one is asking for help. So at Chem and with colleagues, you can always ask for help with understanding your reports, and we can support your teams, but also with your colleagues. If you have a report and you go, I'm not really sure what this data is showing me, that is okay. You can actually take it to one of your staff meetings or CPD time. You go, actually, could you just help me understand this? You can have a discussion about it, and then you could just have those really good conversations where you bounce off each other's ideas. And I think it's a really positive thing to do. And also, if you've got a nice cup of tea and biscuits, it always helps as well, I found. Yeah, so that's one tip I think is really good. So intervention planning. The best part of Chem is all our useful and helpful reports. You can use these reports to help inform your planning and help use it further. So I would really recommend that you use the reports to create planning. Apologies. You use the reports to create planning. Use the reports to create planning. Oh, my apologies about this. So I would recommend that you use the reports to help with your planning. So for example, over a half term, if you get your data, I think it's a really, really good idea that you then go, okay, so I've got my breakdown. For example, I've got my breakdown here of reading, gen maths, mental arithmetic, and developed ability. So I would really recommend that you use this report and go, okay, so let's look at some of the data here. You go, okay, some pupils are lower, some are higher, and you identify ones. For example, in mental arithmetic, someone's got a score of 98. And you go, okay, that's an area that I need to focus on and support that pupil. And you can then create short and informative interventions that have clear learning outcomes from this. So you go, okay, I'm going to create a group all around mental arithmetic to help with this. And I think that is a really good way to do it. And then just being really understanding of what the area is, how you can target it, and then developing from there. And then you can assess if the child has developed in that really positive way. So here's an example I've made. Everyone does it differently in schools, but for example here, what I've done is I have done this, where you can see I've got my learning objectives. So I looked at this report here. I've got our general maths module, and I went, okay, so data handling for this pupil is quite low, and maybe a few others as well for reports. So I've looked at my national curriculum statements, gone, okay, this is what the national curriculum recommends that I do. And I've then generated learning objectives and teaching guidance of what I would recommend doing for the interventions that maybe another adult could do, or another TA, and in this way then go and support that pupil to develop their learning and plug those gaps. And this is a really good way to do it, and it's just I've got a really clear guidance of what the outcome is for each lesson. And I'd really recommend this as it's just really straightforward and really helpful. So my next tip is using the data from reports to build clear learning objectives. You probably already do this as well, but I found it really helps that when you have the reports, you actually get the data. Instead of just doing interventions, you can feed that into your lessons as well to help build those really strong learning outcomes. So it's really good to identify what the lowest areas maybe for the whole class. So you can look at our reports and you can see that there's areas where you get the whole class reports. You can see that maybe they're lower in data analysis, or maybe it's in reading area. What you can do is you can go, okay, I'm going to feed this into my planning. And that's when I'd recommend you identify the weak area and you go, okay, this is what I can do. And then I recommend looking at the national curriculum to see, okay, it says I need to do this. And then you feed that all into your medium-term plan. And again, this can link to your collaborative conversations with your teammates in school. You could then all make medium-term plans together and help feed into those ideas, or you can do it by yourself. It's up to you. And then, you make the long-term plan of LOs, and then that helps inform your planning weekly for when you're making your lessons. And it's a really good guidance. And then if anyone says, so what are you doing to address this gap in your class? You go, actually, I've got my medium-term plan here. Here's my learning objective outcomes, and this is what I'm going to do to target it. And I think it's a really great way to do this, as it shows progression for the pupils, it shows you're understanding their needs, and also it's a really nice way for you to know where your class is at and what they need to support this. It's really good. Also, I think it makes a really clear learning journey. So when you start the topic, you go, okay, children, we're learning this. And they might go, okay, but why are we doing this, this, and this? And I think it's a really good way to say, actually, we're doing this because we're really focusing on this key skill. From your baseline assessments, which you did with Chem, we can see that you really need to, we can work together to help improve this. And you can explain why we're doing it. And I think it's a really nice way. There's open conversations and explain why they're learning it and the positives. Again, building that nice positive atmosphere in the classroom as well. And here is an example. So at the top here, it's quite small, but I made a whole overview of different learning objectives I want for each week. And this is a close-up of a breakdown of what I might do as a really loose plan to target it. So if it was identified that as the weeks in composition and features of writing, I would then go and target it and break down the learning objective I want and then target it this way. And it's a really helpful way to do it. And I think it's really clear for teachers. So I'd really recommend it. And differentiating instructions. So I mean this in two different ways. So first of all, when you're doing the assessment, I think it's really, really helpful to explain how the assessment works, because as it is adaptive and it changes, some children do finish before others. I've been in a classroom before and I've seen some children finish before others have, and they've gone, oh, but they finished. I don't understand. And they've maybe thought they've done something wrong, but actually it's not how it works. So it's good to explain that the assessment is different for every pupil. Every pupil sees different questions, and it's a really nice way to do it. And I think explaining why they're doing the assessment, explaining that it's telling the teacher what they know, it helps the teacher make fun and exciting lessons. And I think changing the instruction is good, because if you have, let's say, year 2 class, you're going to explain it differently to a year 6 class. I think it's really good to explain how friendly and nice it is in that way, to differentiate how you're explaining what they are doing. And especially if you have some pupils who maybe get a bit of test anxiety, they struggle a bit, I think it's really good to differentiate and have a small group. So if you have a teaching assistant in your class, or there's another teacher who can help, maybe having a smaller group, they can go into a different room and have some quieter time to do it. And I think that's a really good way to understand their needs and understand the instructions they would need to feel comfortable doing the assessment. I've been into a school before where we're doing our chem assessments, and I've actually had one child go, oh, I don't really feel that comfortable sitting in the classroom. So they've actually gone and sat in the corridor where they can be seen by the teacher. They've been happy doing their assessment, sitting next to their coat, and they've been having a great time. I think it's a good way to know, and as teachers, you know their needs, you know what they want, and it's a good way to say, okay, this child needs that calmer space, and they're happy there, and it's letting them do it that way. I think it's a really good way to understand their needs and explain why they're doing it. It's especially important to differentiate instructions for the key areas of development. So once you've done the reports or anything else, it's good to understand that you need to tailor teaching methods and materials to meet the individual's needs. Especially in assessment, you can use paper or pencils to write notes as well. So pupils are allowed that if they want to write notes on paper to keep them calmer. But you can also use a variety of methods to explain and just express what the child is comfortable with and different learning styles. and offering different levels of support, providing a range of materials and resources to support diverse learning styles and abilities. You can even give pupils extra time and also address it in this way. But I think this is a really good way to do it, as every child is different, every class is different, every year group is different. And I think it's just something to think about when you're starting the assessments, about what you're going to say and what you're going to do going forward from this. And that is some of my recommendations. So I'm going to pass you back over to Megan, because Megan's going to tell you about something exciting that's coming from us here at Chem now.
Great, thank you, Lucy. Yeah, just a reminder as well, if you have any questions or comments about anything that Lucy discussed, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the questions box. I'll be happy to answer them. But before that, I just wanted to share with you a new primary assessment that is coming in 3 weeks now, I think. So it's called Cambridge Primary Insight, and it is our next generation Primary Insight product. So you may know INCAS, which is our existing primary baseline assessment, and this is our sort of next generation version of INCAS. So there's a few new sort of features in this new assessment. One is new teacher guidance, which gives you instant insight to support best next steps for every learner. There's a new individual parent report. There's a responsive interface for tablet and for desktop, and improved content for students with English as an additional language, as well as an improved overall user experience. So there's a webinar on the 18th.
Here's some information.
Sorry. There's a webinar on the 18th of April at 4 p.m. If you're interested in finding out a bit more about Cambridge Primary Insight, I will put the registration link in the chat now. And I'll also, sorry, just popping that there now. I'll also include it in the email follow-up with the webinar recording and the slides from Lucy's presentation today, if you're interested in signing up. I'm also going to put some information about our primary assessments, BASE and INCAS, in the chat as well. So if you're interested in finding out a bit more about our primary assessments, then you can click there. So I'll just go to any questions we may have. There's one here, Lucy, about whether we have so you know the examples that you showed in tip 3 for creating interventions. Do you have any sort of templates or anywhere where you got that guidance from that other people can implement in their own schools?
Oh, that's a really good question. So my school previously used this template. It was just made on Word, but we had the breakdown of the sessions, the learning objectives, and then the outcome of the session, just to support our teaching assistants. But to be honest, you can make it whatever way works for your school, and it depends on timings as well. So I was quite lucky that I had a morning TA, so she always helped me, and I had time to be able to have these short, sharp 20-minute interventions, and that's why I had this kind of plan, and then I made sheets to support it and extra work that they could follow up with, but it depends on your school. But I would recommend TES has a lot of good, helpful about layouts that you can look at, but also talking to teacher friends. I previously talked to some other local teachers I know, and they sent me some really good ideas of what they did when I was doing assessments, and it really helped support me as a teacher and help me feed back in. Yeah.
Thank you. Let me just have a quick look. Don't think any more questions have come through. But if you do have any questions after you've seen the recording or had a look through the slides again and you want to get in touch, please feel free to. We'll include our contact details in the follow-up email. But yeah, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Lucy for presenting today, and for all of you for attending. Hope you found it useful and informative. And we'll be sending the slides and the recording around in the next week or so. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at Chem. We'll leave you to have a great rest of your afternoon. And thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.